Today we're uncovering 4 big changes in Canada that no one's talking about. Once you see them, you'll never see this country the same. Thanks for clicking on this video and enjoy. Canada is changing. And as probably many of you don't know, this isn't the kind of change we grew up with. It's not just another condo sprouting up or another Starbucks opening on the corner. No, what's happening is far bigger and much harder to ignore. Across the country, massive cultural monuments are going up. 50-foot statues, towering temples, sprawling cultural centers. And here's the point. These aren't just buildings for quiet worship. They're statements. Some call it pride. Others call it a takeover. But one thing is clear. Canada will never look the same. And if you're asking whether Canadians are ready for this, the answer is no. Because monuments this big don't just reshape skylines. They spark division, protests, and culture wars that will ripple across the country. In Mississauga, they just unveiled a 51-foot ram statue at the Hindu Heritage Center, the tallest of its kind in North America. Take a look at this. Even mainstream outlets like Times of India called it a spectacular landmark visible near Pearson Airport. Think about that. The first thing you see flying into Canada is now a religious statue. People on the plane are probably thinking they got on the wrong flight, that they've landed in India by mistake. But no, that's Canada in 2025. For the Indian community, it's pride. But critics see a problem.
Welcome to Canada, guys. Look at the size of the thing. Fucking ridiculous statue.
Scale, noise, and a skyline hijacked without consultation. And this is where tensions begin. Because monuments this visible don't just attract praise, they attract backlash. In fact, earlier this year, another Hindu temple in Mississauga was vandalized with anti-India graffiti. That's the warning sign. These structures won't just divide opinion, they'll eventually trigger protests, counter-protests, and political fights in the streets. And in Brampton, it went even further. Not to be outdone, the city unveiled a 54-foot Shiva statue, taller, louder, and even more dominant. Supporters call it culture on display, but critics say it's a skyline hijack. Headlines bragged about how it's now one of the tallest in North America. Even India Today commented about it. Locals joke you don't need Google Maps. You just turn left at Shiva, keep right at Ram. Funny? Sure. But when jokes wear off, frustration turns into something else. Traffic jams, blocked streets, neighborhoods overtaken. That's the recipe for massive local pushback. Don't be surprised if Brampton becomes ground zero for the first major Canadian protests over cultural monuments. Because the bigger these statues get, the bigger the anger around them will grow. Now here's where it gets even more controversial. In Nova Scotia, a South Indian temple is rising in a small fishing town. For the Indian community, it's historic. But for locals, it's out of place, swapping lighthouses for temple towers. Tourists once came for lobster rolls and whale watching. Now they're taking temple tours and posting about butter chicken on the docks. This isn't just multiculturalism. This is identity replacement. And when identity is threatened, communities don't stay quiet. The risk here is that small-town Canadians, people who never thought protests would come to their fishing villages, will soon be holding signs outside temples demanding their towns back. And when that happens, media will spin it as racism. Politicians will get dragged in, and Canada's culture wars will explode even further. And in Markham and Scarborough, the scale is different again. Massive cultural centers that aren't just places of worship. They're temples, schools, and political halls all in one. For the community, it's about survival and roots. But neighbors see disruption. Traffic, fireworks, and calendars filled with Diwali, Holi, and Navratri, while Canada Day fades into the background. This is where critics say the danger is clearest. Because when local traditions feel erased, people don't just complain online, they organize. Imagine petitions, angry town halls, and eventually, political candidates running on promises to stop it. These cultural centers aren't just buildings. They're flashpoints waiting to erupt into protest movements. So from Mississauga to Brampton, from the Maritimes to Scarborough, the story is the same. These aren't just religious buildings quietly blending in. They're monuments, huge, permanent, and unavoidable. For some, they're pride. For others, they're disruption. But the bigger truth is this. The more of these projects go up, the more Canada will see division, resentment, and eventually protests in the streets. Because Canadians were ready for shawarma shops and small mosques in plazas. They weren't ready for 50-foot statues, temples in fishing towns, and cultural centres running politics on Canadian soil. Canada will never look the same again. And if you're asking whether Canadians are ready for that, the answer is no. Because when monuments become flashpoints, protests become inevitable. And Canada's so-called multicultural harmony will be tested like never before. And if you want more stories like this, about Ontario and across Canada, stories the mainstream media won't show you, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and comment below. Let me know what you think. Is this pride, or is this overreach? I read every comment, and your voice matters. Stay tuned, because there's a lot more going on in Ontario that you probably didn't even know.